There is something happening inside your mind right now that ancient seers called the most dangerous prison ever constructed. Not built with walls, not sealed with iron, built entirely from your own thoughts. And the architects of the oldest mystery traditions, from the Hermetic schools of Alexandria to the Pythagorean brotherhoods of Croton, knew something about this prison that modern psychology has only recently begun to rediscover. They called it the Mirror Labyrinth. The mind folded back on itself, infinite reflection, zero escape. This is not a video about stress management. This is not a wellness lecture. What you are about to hear is a precise account of what is actually happening inside you, cosmically, neurologically, archetypally, when you cannot stop thinking. When the loop starts. When the voice inside your head begins to replay the conversation from 3 days ago, rehearse the argument that hasn't happened yet. Calculate every possible way a decision could go wrong. You have been told that this is anxiety. You have been told this is overthinking. But the truth is older than those words, and far more significant. Stay with this until the end, because what is revealed in the final section changes everything. Let us begin with what they never taught you. In 600 BCE, the philosopher Heraclitus wrote that you cannot step into the same river twice. But there is a darker corollary to that observation that history buried. He also wrote that most human beings spend their entire lives not in the river, but standing on the bank, staring at the water, calculating whether to step in. The river moves, the thinker does not. The water carries everything forward. The thinker remains frozen. Heraclitus called this condition the sleeping mind, the mind that mistakes activity for movement. He was describing you, not as an insult, as a diagnosis, because the sleeping mind is not a flaw. It is a function, and like all functions, it was installed for a reason. But when a function runs past its purpose, when it loops without end, without resolution, without release, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a cage. It becomes the mirror labyrinth. And here is what the ancients understood that you were never told. The labyrinth does not trap you from outside, it grows from within. Every time the loop runs, every time you replay the moment, revisit the mistake, rehearse the catastrophe, the walls of the labyrinth grow thicker. The exits narrow, the silence becomes more distant. This is not metaphor, this is mechanics. And the mechanics are written in the stars. Right now, in this specific window of time, the cosmos has positioned itself in a configuration that the medieval Arab astrologers called Muqtarin al-Dhihni, the mind conjunction. It is not a term you will find in mainstream astrology books. It was preserved in a fragment of the Kitab al-Kawakib al-Thabita, the Book of Fixed Stars, and it describes a precise alignment between Mercury and Saturn in which the rational mind turns inward rather than outward. Rather than processing and releasing information, the mind accumulates and recirculates it. You are living inside Muqtarin al-Dhihni right now. Mercury governs the movement of thoughts, reception, transmission, the channel through which perception travels. Saturn governs structure, delay, contraction, the principle of limitation made manifest. When these two forces conjoin in a particular arc, especially when Saturn occupies the 29th degree of its sign, the degree the Sabian symbols describe as a moment of karmic completion and unresolved tension, Mercury loses its forward momentum. The signal loops. The message is sent but never delivered. The thought arises but never lands. This is the astrological signature of the overthinking mind, and you did not choose it. It chose you. It chose this moment. And the question is not whether you can escape the configuration. The question is whether you know what the configuration is actually trying to show you. Because the conjunction is not a punishment, it is a revelation, and revelations always feel like pressure before they feel like freedom. Now let us go deeper. Let us talk about the architecture of the loop itself. There are 7 layers to the overthinking cycle. The mystery traditions called them the seven veils, not in the sense of the Salome story, though the symbolism is connected, but in the sense of seven successive layers of concealment that the mind places over reality in order to delay its own awakening. Each veil is a specific type of mental movement. Each one feels like thinking. None of them are. The first veil is recollection. You return to the past event. You re-enter the room. You hear the words again. You feel the feeling again. The mind frames this as review, as processing, as learning. It is not. It is excavation without purpose. It is pulling a wound open to check whether it still bleeds. The second veil is revision. You begin to rewrite what happened. You imagine different words, different responses, different outcomes. This feels like problem solving. It is not. The event is fixed. The past is crystallized. Revision of what already occurred is not analysis. It is the construction of a parallel reality that you will never inhabit, inhabited only by a version of you that does not exist. The third veil is projection. Now the mind moves forward. It begins to calculate the future. It anticipates consequences. It models outcomes. It rehearses disasters. This feels like preparation. It is not. It is the generation of fear scenarios that the body cannot distinguish from actual events. Meaning every catastrophe you imagine in granular detail registers in your nervous system as an event that has already occurred. The fourth veil is comparison. You begin to measure yourself against others, your path against different paths, your choices against unchosen alternatives. This feels like assessment. It is not. It is the construction of a measuring instrument calibrated to produce only one result, that you are insufficient. The fifth veil is justification. You begin to build the case. You gather evidence for why you were right, why you were wronged, why the situation unfolded as it did. This feels like clarity. It is not. It is the mind prosecuting a trial in a courtroom where it is simultaneously the judge, the jury, the prosecution, and the defendant, and the verdict was decided before the proceedings began. The sixth veil is anticipation of judgment. You begin to model how others perceive you, what they are thinking, what they are saying. You construct entire imagined conversations in the minds of people who are not thinking about you at all. This feels like social awareness. It is not. It is the projection of your own inner critic onto the external world, and then using that projection as evidence that the world confirms what the critic already said. The seventh veil is exhaustion mistaken for resolution. The mind, having cycled through the previous six, reaches a state of depletion. The thoughts slow. The body feels heavy. You mistake this for peace, for having worked through something, for arrival. It is not resolution. It is the temporary cessation of the engine, not because the engine has been corrected, but because it has run out of fuel. Tomorrow, or in 3 hours, or in 20 minutes, the fuel replenishes, and the loop begins again. 7 veils, 7 movements, 1 prison, and you have been walking its corridors as though they were hallways in your own home. Now here is the scientific dimension. Because this is not only ancient knowledge, this is current neuroscience confirming what the mystics mapped. The default mode network. This is the specific neural architecture that lights up when you are not engaged in a directed task. When you have no immediate external focus, the brain activates a network of regions: the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the angular gyrus that researchers initially assumed were simply at rest. They were wrong. This network is extraordinarily active during apparent stillness, and what it is doing during that activation is precisely what the ancients described as the Mirror Labyrinth. It is running self-referential simulations. It is modeling past social events and projecting future social scenarios. It is rehearsing conversations that have not occurred. It is replaying conversations that have. It is constructing identity narratives, the story of who you are, who you have been, who you might become, in a continuous, unbroken loop. The default mode network does not distinguish between a memory and a current event. It does not distinguish between an imagined threat and a real one. When you rehearse an argument in your mind with the intensity of genuine emotion, the same neural pathways fire as they would during the actual event. You are not preparing for the experience. You are having the experience, multiple times, in a state of pure energy expenditure with zero resolution. This is what makes the loop metabolically expensive, not just psychologically exhausting, literally expensive. Overthinking consumes glucose. It elevates cortisol. It sustains the body in a state of low-grade physiological stress that is indistinguishable at the cellular level from the stress of genuine danger. You are not worried about the future. Your body believes the future has already arrived, and it is already catastrophic, and it has been catastrophic every single day for years. This is not a metaphor, this is your biology. And now you understand why you are tired in ways that sleep cannot reach. Now let us talk about the cosmic timing. Because this is where the ancient and the modern converge in a way that demands your attention. The current planetary cycle is not arbitrary. The Saturn-Mercury dynamic operating in this window corresponds to what Hellenistic astrologers called the Katabole period, the descent. A phase in which information turns inward, in which the rational faculties become recursive rather than generative. The Katabole was considered both a crisis and a preparation, a shedding of false cognition before a period of radical clarity. In ancient Egypt, this threshold was marked by the festival of Am-Duat, the passage through the Duat, the hidden underworld of the mind. The initiates did not fear this passage. They were trained for it. They knew that the deepest layer of the Duat was not populated by external demons, but by the thoughts the initiate had never resolved. The unfinished conversations, the unmade decisions, the unexpressed truths, the fears never faced in daylight. The initiate who passed through the Am-Duat without being consumed by those internal figures emerged on the other side transformed. Not because the thoughts were destroyed, but because the initiate had stopped running from them and had instead turned to face them, had looked at them directly, had recognized them for what they were, not prophecies, not facts, not certainties, movements of energy through a mind that had mistaken itself for the thoughts it was generating. You are in your Am-Duat right now. The cosmic configuration confirms it. The neurological evidence confirms it. The exhaustion you feel confirms it. And the question the Duat asks, the question it has always asked, is, are you the thinker, or are you the thought? This is the precise turning point. And here is where everything changes. Every tradition that mapped the mind, Hermetic, Pythagorean, Vedantic, Buddhist, Kabbalistic, arrived at the same central discovery from different directions. The discovery is this: you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise. You are not the river. You are not the one standing frozen on the bank. You are the sky in which both the river and the bank appear. And the sky does not drown. The sky does not freeze. The sky cannot be trapped inside a labyrinth. This is not a motivational statement. This is a metaphysical fact that every serious system of inner knowledge has confirmed. The Kabbalists call this the distinction between nefesh and neshama, between the animating vital soul that generates reactive thought and the higher soul that observes without identification. The Hermetic tradition called it the difference between the nu, the universal intelligence, and the lower demiurgic mind, the craftsman mind, the mind that endlessly shapes and reshapes material without resting in the source from which all shaping emerges. When you observe a thought, not react to it, not follow it, not suppress it, but simply observe it, something extraordinary happens. The default mode network begins to quiet. The cortisol curve flattens. The loop, deprived of your identification, loses momentum. The walls of the labyrinth do not need to be demolished. They dissolve the moment you stop believing they are real. This is not about positive thinking. This is not about affirmations. This is about a fundamental repositioning of awareness, from inside the thought to above it, from inside the loop to outside it, from inside the labyrinth to the bird's eye position that can see the labyrinth entire. And from that position, what appeared to be an infinite maze is revealed to be a pattern, a small one, repeating, not infinite, not inescapable, simply repeating and awaiting your recognition. The moment of recognition is the moment the cycle breaks, and the break does not require years of therapy or decades of meditation. It requires one thing, one movement. The movement the mystery schools called the epistrophe, the turning back. The turning of attention back toward its own source. You do not have to stop thinking. You have to stop believing that you are your thinking. You have to introduce the gap, the space between the thought and your response to it. And in that gap, which has always been there, which has never been absent, which was only obscured by the volume of the loop in that gap, you find the silence that the labyrinth was designed to make you forget existed. And in that silence, action becomes possible. Of no see offend of desperation, you counterfeiring not a imagination or stops. And all their salutation as F&I. Between 1957 and 1977, you've felt it your entire life, haven't you? A mind that no longer needs certainty before it moves, because it has recognized that certainty is a product of the loop, a thing the loop promises and never delivers, and that actual clarity does not come before action. It comes through action. It is born in movement. It crystallizes in doing, not in analysis of doing. The ancient Roman Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire while practicing this discipline with extraordinary precision, recorded this insight in the Meditations with a directness that has never been surpassed. The obstacle is the way, not around, not over, through. The thought that loops is not the problem to be solved before you can live. It is the path through which the living begins. You do not wait for silence before you act. You act, and silence follows. And now let us come to the final revelation, the one that was held until this moment for a reason. The reason your mind overthinks is not because you are weak. It is not because you are anxious by nature. It is not because something is broken in you. The mind overthinks because it is trying to protect something it has come to believe is fragile. And what it believes is fragile, what the entire architecture of the Mirror Labyrinth is constructed to defend, is you. Your mind has built the labyrinth because it loves you. Because at some point, and you know when that point was, even if you do not speak it, the world showed you that the unexpected could wound. That openness carried cost. That trust was not always returned. And the mind, which is above all a survival instrument, began to calculate, to model, to prepare, to ensure that the wound would never catch you unaware again. The labyrinth is not your enemy. It is a guardian that outlived its emergency. And guardians that outlive their emergency do not need to be destroyed. They need to be released from duty. They need to be thanked, not sarcastically, not as a psychological technique, but genuinely. Because the mind that built the Mirror Labyrinth to protect you is the same mind that, once freed from the obligation of constant vigilance, is capable of extraordinary things. Perception of extraordinary clarity, creative capacity of extraordinary depth, intuition of extraordinary precision. The mind that stops fighting itself becomes the mind that changes everything. This is where you are, right now. In this specific window of time, the cosmos is positioned, the Mercury-Saturn dynamic, the 29th degree tension, the catabolic threshold, not to trap you further in the labyrinth, but to show you its walls clearly for the first time, to illuminate every corner, to make the pattern so visible that recognition becomes unavoidable. The Am-Duat is not a punishment, it is a graduation exam. And you were sent this video. In this moment, on this day, because the exam has been placed in front of you. Not arbitrarily, not randomly. The cosmic mechanics that govern synchronicity do not operate through chance. You arrived here because something in the configuration of your consciousness is ready to cross the threshold. The ancients did not teach the epistrophe to everyone. They taught it to those who had suffered the labyrinth long enough to be genuinely ready to leave it. Suffering has a purpose. Not because pain is valuable in itself, but because pain at a sufficient depth breaks the illusion that the labyrinth provides safety. When the walls hurt as much as the open sky, the choice to step through the exit becomes inevitable. Are you there yet? I think you are. I think the reason you watched this far is because part of you already knows what has to happen next. The loop has to be named. The guardian has to be released. The thought has to be observed rather than inhabited. And then, one step, imperfect, uncertain, and alive, you move. Not when it is safe. Not when you are certain. Now, tell me in the comments right now, before you scroll, before you move, what thought has been looping for you? What is the thing the Mirror Labyrinth has been running over and over? Name it. Type it. Because naming the loop begins the dissolution. The labyrinth requires anonymity. It requires that you never speak what runs within it. The moment you name it, it begins to lose its walls. And if this reached something in you, if something in this transmission struck a frequency you recognized, then you already know what to do next. You share this with someone who is standing on the bank, frozen, watching the river move without them. Because the epistrophe does not happen in isolation, it happens in the recognition of shared experience. You are not the only one inside the labyrinth, and no one escapes it alone. What was revealed here is only the beginning. The next transmission goes further, into the specific archetypes that construct the labyrinth, into the planetary signatures that indicate when the exit appears, into the ancient protocols, preserved in fragments, suppressed in others, that accelerate the crossing. That content exists, and it is coming. Subscribe, because what comes next is not for everyone, only for those who were ready for this. The river is moving, and now, finally, so are you.